this edition of One on One. Our topic of discussion today is cardiovascular diseases, heart attacks, strokes. Cardiovascular diseases account for almost a third of all deaths in this country. It is presumed that these are lifestyle ailments. These are diseases of the rich and the privileged. But no, things are changing. More and more people who belong to the poorer sections of society, those who live in rural areas, and younger people are today dying because of cardiovascular diseases, heart attacks and strokes. Why is this happening? Is it just got something to do with the kind of foods we are eating, how much we are eating, the absence of physical activity or exercise? So to what extent are government policies, corporate policies, responsible for the current state of affairs? To discuss this question, I have with me a senior journalist and an author. He's recently published this book. HarperCollins has published this book. The book is called Know Your Heart. But what is important is the subtitle of the book. The subtitle of the book is The Hidden Links Between Your Body and the Politics of the State. Let me welcome my old colleague and friend Dinesh Sharma, award-winning journalist, written for various newspapers and magazines, well-known writer on science and technology, health and environment. Your articles have appeared in the Times of India, Hindustan Times, Mail Today, Bangkok Post, Lancet. Your first book, for the benefit of our readers, was on the Long Revolution. It was titled The Long Revolution. It was about the birth and the growth of India's information technology industry. Postgraduate from Osmania University, Hyderabad. Thank you, Dinesh, for coming here, and congratulations on publishing your book.
Thank you.
If I can first ask you, there are books and books about what you need to do so that you don't have cardiovascular diseases, so that you have a healthy heart. But tell me, what made you focus on what you say, the hidden links between your body and the politics of the state? What motivated you to write a book about your heart and people's hearts from this angle?
Because what you see is most of the books which you referred to tell the individual what to do to keep yourself healthy, how to keep your shape of your heart in a healthy situation and prevent, diseases as you age.
Exercise,
So,
don't eat junk food, high sugar, high fat, high salt, yes.
So all those factors are known for quite some time. But what I found, say around 2000 and years following that the number of incidents which you heard from your families, colleagues, friends, your close circle was going up phenomenal. It's not as if heart disease was not occurring in the 80s or 70s, it was, but we didn't hear about it so much. That was one thing, that was one situation. The other situation was where more and more scientific studies were coming out about the incidence and prevalence of cardiovascular diseases in India in general, and low-income countries all over the world. WHO was warning. So what I thought said, this is the situation on one hand. On the other hand, the doctor is telling the individual that these are the risk factors of heart disease which we know. That is the diets rich in salt, sugar and fat, that is so-called unhealthy diets, then lack of physical exercise, tobacco, and then there are medical causes like diabetes and hypertension. So these are all underlying conditions, and so what you need to do is then a to-do list.
You're absolutely correct, Dinesh.
Yeah.
And I know it, I guess, better than some others. 14 years ago, I had a myocardial infarction. There are three stents in my right coronary artery, and it happened a few weeks after my 45th birthday. More and more young people, and it's no longer considered a lifestyle disease, so to say. I mean, how did this transformation take place? And I want you to link it to the politics of the state, to government policies.
That's right.
Yes.
So I wanted to go beyond what was known about heart disease and its medical and other causes, the high risk factors which were very well known. So I wanted to look at, so for example, you take unhealthy diets. If people are consuming more and more of unhealthy diets or unhealthy food, or the junk food,
high sugar,
high sugar and fat. So why it was that they were doing so now, or why the eating habits have changed in the say past 20-25 years, or if we are doing less of physical activity, we are becoming more and more, sedentary in our lifestyle. So why is it that we are doing, less of physical activity, or tobacco consumption is going up?
So
why
you highlighted 3 points: the kind of food we eat, the absence of physical activity in our lives, and tobacco. So if I just ask you, in all these 3 areas, if I ask you to identify important government policies which you would hold responsible, and on the launch of your book at the India International Center, Dr. K. Srinath Reddy, who is the first Indian to head the International Association for Heart Physicians, he said it's not just policy neglect, but policy complicity.
Yes.
Please elaborate.
So when I started looking at these, especially these 3 risk factors, that because individuals live in an environment, you take cues from the environment. You don't start doing a particular thing in a particular fashion all of a sudden. So the environment was changing. What I found that the food ecology of India was changing. How we consume food, where we consume food, what kind of food we consume has undergone tremendous changes in say past 25 years. And it so happened that that's the period of globalization and economic liberalization. So it is almost coinciding between, say, if you look at the global
the 90s.
The 90s. No, because the global burden of disease study gave data from 1990 till 2010, and they found that the global burden of disease in India, the burden of disease in India has completely changed
in these 2 decades,
from communicable to non-communicable diseases. Diarrheal diseases were number 1 cause in 1990. It is the cardiovascular diseases in 2010. So I started analyzing, what happened between this period. So if you take food ecology, it has completely changed in the sense of availability of food, the variety of food, the availability of food in terms of its packaging,
the way it is advertised and marketed.
So all of that has changed. So the main factor is the rise of processed food industry, or you can also call in some cases ultra processed food industry.
And you in fact have a Ministry of Food Processing Industries which encourages processing, because they believe that this is the best way to ensure that the food that is wasted, the very high proportion of the fruits and vegetables that are wasted are not wasted. And it's almost as if you compare these foods, the processed foods, vis-a-vis fresh fruits and vegetables, you're making a virtue of eating processed food. And you have an entire ministry in the government doing it.
It's a classic case of how one wing of the government is doing exactly opposite what the other wing is saying. For example, processed food industry you mentioned. Health Ministry says, according to the WHO advice, that processed food, foods rich in salt, sugar and fat are bad for your health. But on the other hand, your Ministry of Food Processing, as you rightly pointed out, which is promoting its food processing industry, because of course it started with a noble cause, I would say, in 1980s, in late 80s, that we need to promote processing of food. Food, so that fruits and vegetables don't go waste. So
that was one of the value to give a higher return, to remunerative returns to your farmers and others who are processing those.
But what happened over a period of time is that the food produced by farmers is being seen more as a raw material for an industry called food processing industry. So whatever food processing industry wants, farmers are producing and they are processing and selling it in terms of packaged products. Not that if you look at the figures, the wastage of fruits and vegetables has not gone down because of, we are still talking of...
We're still talking about one-fifth, one-fourth, one-third of...
Absolutely. So the food processing ministry has been promoting the industry, overlooking the interests of the farmers. So farmers have been relegated to background.
All for that and the health of the population.
Absolutely. So the negative fallout of the promotion of processed food industry has straight away, on the health of the people. That's what it shows. Because look at the kind of programs the ministry has. So for example, it says there's a program called technology upgradation, for which it gives not soft loans but grants.
Subsidy.
Outright grants are being given for processed food units which are trying to upgrade, including set up capital equipment. And who gets...
But how do you define these processed foods? Is it everything from, whatever, chips to pickles to whatever?
Absolutely.
Toffee.
Because anything that is made out of agriculture commodity is considered a processed food for the sake of giving the subsidies. So you have in colas, you have, because it uses sugar, which is an agriculture commodity, you have all kinds of pickles, you have chips, you have including namkeens, confectionery items, you have baked items, everything. Rice milling or pulse milling, everything is,
which would be called junk food.
Including
any sensible mother would restrict the intake of these kinds of foods. Any respect, not just mother, father would ensure that her children should not have excessive amounts of
So anything that is made out of an agriculture commodity gets this subsidy, which includes incidentally wine and beer too. So the state policies are treating wine, beer, potato chips, everything with
virtually on par with each
other. So these subsidies are going in huge amounts. They run into hundreds of crores every year. And how it is affecting the health, I'll just give you one example. For example,
and then we'll take a break.
Rice milling. It's a very good example, how states is subsidizing ill health, I would say. Because you take rice milling was a restricted industry, then they gave up, they removed the licensing norm, so everybody is getting a license. Not only that, secondly, every rice mill gets a subsidy from Government of India to upgrade technology or whatever, which could be up to 50 lakhs and in some cases 75 lakhs. Why is rice milling bad? Because if you remember, earlier we used to eat brown rice or unmilled rice or partially milled rice. Rice needs some kind of a milling to remove the impurities and flakes. But what is happening in these modern rice mills is they are removing the outer layer which contains all the nutrients to make it white. So you have two varieties.
So it just looks good,
but it's not healthy. Its shelf life is longer, but it is unhealthy in the sense that there are several studies that show that the nutritive layers which are removed are protective for your heart. So here is a commodity or the processed food sector which government is promoting through subsidies, which is patently unhealthy.
All right. So I'm stopping you here. I need to take a break in our discussion. Let's look at some of these issues you've touched in greater detail. Let's look at issues relating to the tobacco industry, the tobacco business. Let's look at more instances and more examples of not only how different ministries and departments of the government, their policies are in contradiction, are direct contradiction and conflict with each other and one another, but how actually public policies are contributing to bad health and therefore, a rise in cardiovascular diseases. So let's examine this issue in greater detail. We're looking at your heart, your health, and you have to understand it's not just what you eat, how much you eat, and whether you're tense, but whether you like it or not. The government's own policies are contributing towards a rise in cardiovascular disease, ailments, and deaths across this country. Not just a lifestyle disease of the rich, but it is contributing to the deaths of the poor and in rural areas. We'll take this discussion forward. With me here is the author of this book, Dinesh Sharma. We'll be back with you in a short while from now. Stay with us. Welcome back to our discussion on how government policies are actually contributing to the rise in cardiovascular diseases in this country. With me here in the studio of Lok Sabha Television, I have Dinesh C Sharma. He's a senior journalist. He's a writer on science, technology, health and environment. He's recently written this book. It's called Know Your Heart. The subtitle is an interesting one. It says, "The Hidden Links Between Your Body and the Politics of the State." Dinesh, let's talk a little bit about tobacco.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that this is again not a new argument. Tobacco contributes to lung cancer, cardiovascular ailments, huge millions and millions of deaths. Not just cigarettes, bidis, particularly in a country like India. Yet, tobacco cultivation is encouraged by the government. There's a tobacco board in this country. It provides a livelihood to large numbers of farmers across the country. It provides employment to large numbers of people, women, even children, even if it's illegal in cases, cottage industries. And it's an issue of public health. But at the same time, when you look at lawmakers, they have their constituents to think of. Say, what do you do if in your constituent, in your area where you're getting elected as a member of parliament, there are large numbers of people whose livelihood depends on the tobacco business. And I'll name two people, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, who is our president, and Mr. Praful Patel, the former union minister. There are two examples. We can talk about them, but this issue of farming, livelihoods, and public health.
Yeah, because tobacco is, I would say, it's a complex commodity. It's a legal commodity, yet it is considered a very unhealthy, as you rightly pointed out. Globally, there is a framework convention on tobacco control. WHO considered it as a poison, but since it's a legal commodity, the growing of tobacco has not yet been banned, because it's an agriculture product which farmers produce and a lot of people are involved. But you have to look at it that way, in a different way. And whenever you talk about tobacco, people say that its government is taxing tobacco a great deal and they are earning a lot of revenue, therefore they don't want to give it up on that tobacco. But there are two sides of it. Of course, government is taxing, but not to the extent it should tax. And the tobacco products are still affordable. For example, bidis are hardly taxed.
No, in fact, I'm glad you made this point, that taxes are going up on cigarettes, so it's affecting ITC and Godfrey Phillips. But bidis, which are consumed by poor people, there's, I think, negligible tax or
there's virtually no tax, in the sense for a bun for 1,000 bidis there a tax of I think 18 rupees or so, which is virtually no tax. So it's not the question of which product is taxed and how much, but we have not reached a level where it becomes deterrent for the smokers to quit. So that argument apart.
Even as there's greater awareness when you're banning smoking from public places and offices and buildings and so on and so forth.
Yeah, but those are all half-hearted measures. Public, there's been a lot of hue and cry about banning smoking in public places, and that came out and that came not as a result of a public policy making, but directives from the central government. From the courts, and that's how the public ban on public smoking came about. Similarly, the ban on gutka has also resulted out of the rulings from the court, and not as a form of public policy making, that it was not a proactive government which has done that. And pictorial warning, as you know, that it has taken several,
tell me what happened. You described in some detail what happened in 2008 when there was an issue of putting these pictorial warnings on the cigarette packets. You have really, ugly, ghastly pictures of diseased lungs and cancerous body parts. And I've seen, public interest films where you show people who are dying or on the verge of dying. So what was the debate? What was the reaction of people like Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, Mr. Patel?
See, as you know, tobacco is a political commodity. For example, the whole of Andhra Pradesh Assembly passed a resolution against pictorial warnings across all the parties, including...
So they all came together?
Yeah, they all came together and passed a resolution. And several chief ministers and hundreds of MPs wrote to the then health minister Ramadas saying that warnings cannot be implemented.
I thought we moved ahead from the days where our first Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru is seen smoking a cigarette with Edwina Mountbatten.
Yeah. No, but the political lobby is still very strong, particularly in the case of BD, because BD is a kind of a still an unorganized industry and deliberately kept so.
But you know, it's kept reserved for the cottage industry.
Yeah, it has been deliberately
are picked by tribals, and you have important politicians like Mr. Praful Patel, his family,
who are
enterprises,
in the BD industry
have a major say in this trade.
So so it has been deliberately kept as a cottage industry, and then there are big industries which control this cottage industry, and they procure from them and then they market. So there is a difference in hand-rolled BDs and machine-rolled BDs when it comes to taxation. So it's been deliberately, the structure has been kept like that. And when you talk about numbers, when constituents of these politicians who control the BD business, either directly or indirectly in terms of people living in their constituencies, is a misnomer, in the sense that people are not employed in the BD industry for whole of the year. Those numbers are very inflated. When you say 6 million people depend on the BD industry, those numbers are inflated. Those employment figures.
And you think they'll be deliberately?
Yes, because in the name of providing livelihood and employment of people,
the tobacco board will describe it as a principal cash crop of national importance.
Absolutely.
As I'm using your words, you talk about the tobacco business being a poster boy of the Ministry of Food Processing Industry. Food processing industry.
No, that's the Commerce Ministry. Tobacco board is in the Commerce Ministry. There's a whole mechanism in the Government of India which promotes tobacco. Only one ministry, that is the Health Ministry, says tobacco is bad, but several ministries say tobacco is good for the national economy. For example, you have the Tobacco Board in the Ministry of Commerce, you have Directorate of Tobacco Development in the Ministry of Agriculture, you have Central Tobacco Research Institute in the Indian Council for Agriculture Research, ICAR. So these are three main mechanisms through which Government of India actively promotes tobacco, and it is providing subsidies in terms of the services it provides to the tobacco industry, to export promotion, for marketing. They hold exhibition. Imagine a commodity which is patently considered unhealthy, Government of India is actively promoting. If not, at least they can stop.
And then yet as a nation, as a percentage of our gross domestic product, we spend a very small proportion on public health. I mean,
absolutely.
Not even, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not even 2% of our GDP. It's lower than that.
Yeah.
Most countries across the world, including developing countries, they spend a far higher proportion on public health.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to numbers, I would like to point out one particular number, because it is often said that, okay, of course tobacco is bad, but it is giving you a lot of revenue. But that's again a very wrong argument, because recently, a few months back, there was a study on the economic burden of tobacco-related diseases, and they calculated a figure of direct and indirect costs of tobacco to be about 1,04,000 crores a year. And the revenue generated by the tobacco industry, with the government earns, maybe it is around 15 to 20,000 crores, even if you put together what the states and the central government produce, earn through revenues from tobacco. So you look at the tobacco burden, which is 1 lakh crore plus, both direct and indirect costs in terms of hospital admissions, cost of the family.
Including the loss of potentially productive, person years or whatever.
Yeah, so look at the whole economics of this thing, and the numbers, you can look at how many people are employed, can they be provided jobs in some other sector, can there be alternative livelihood. We are not even thinking in those terms. No, I would expect the Central Tobacco Research Institute to work on alternative crops, not on producing better varieties of tobacco.
So instead of discouraging, you actually encourage.
In fact, they had a very, I would call it a funny project to produce tobacco where they have a project to have tobacco varieties. Of course, they keep developing new tobacco varieties, but here they are saying that it should be pesticide free, so it is less toxic, which in itself is irony. Amazing. When you have a toxic product, you are spending public money to produce, make it less toxic. What can be more ironic?
It's interesting, I on a personal note, as an ex-smoker, as a person who smoked continuously from the age of 15 till the age of 45, I smoked an average of about 25 cigarettes. You know, some of us don't learn until it's too late perhaps. I was lucky that I'm alive in that sense. But when I just sit back and calculate how much of the money of my own resources that I blew up and what I could have done with it today and how my family and my children could have benefited, it's amazing how हम लोग जानबूझ के ज्ञान पापी हम लोग होते हैं ना जानबूझ के इतने पाप करते हैं.
Yeah, right.
So, and I really think, what is the government doing to change the attitude of people who I used to be, like one of those?
Because on one hand you say that the advertising is banned because the advertising on radio, TV, and newspapers is banned for.
And you allow the same
cigarette. Yeah.
The education
But the point, those restrictions are there. Again, MPs wrote saying that don't make it 100 yards, make it 50 yards. Because it livelihoods. Imagine our public lawmakers, public people saying that, dilute the rules.
Dinesh, it's time for one more break. We are kind of halfway through our discussion, and a number of issues I want to tell you. You talk about advertising and marketing. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about advertising of colas. Let's talk about advertising of potato chips and all the so-called junk foods, foods which are high in sugar, in salt, in fat. Let's look at celebrity endorsements. Let's look at the industry. Let's look how the giant corporations, the multinational corporations, how do they react to this situation? For them, it's a matter of choice. Yeah, right choice, baby, right? We come to that and we'll continue our discussion. We're looking at how public policies, how government is indirectly and sometimes directly contributing to the ill health of the population. How there are conflicts of interest between different ministries and departments of the government. One which promotes good health and others which actually encourage illnesses directly and indirectly and contribute to the deaths of large numbers of people. We'll take this conversation forward in a short while from now. Stay with us.